Thanks, Matt. That was awesome. I love the ADC and the gateway and multi-factor authentication, within Factor. The visualizer, it's a game changer. So if you haven't checked that out, give it a try. It's pretty cool. Want to bring us to our next topic. We have Shane and Ozzy that will be talking to us about how to optimize our Citrix end user experience for call center users. So should be a pretty interesting topic. But before we get to that, we're going to do some more trivia questions. So get ready to put your answers into the, I think it's the Q&A box, and hopefully you'll be a winner. Good luck to all. Okay. Looks like the first correct answer gets cooler. What National Hockey League team was the first to win back-to-back Stanley Cup titles? And it's not the Seattle Krakens, I can tell you that already. It'd help if I put in the chat to see if we have a correct answer. The Edmonton Oilers. Did not know that. Mind blown. Okay. Our next question. What city did the Calgary Flames originate from? It's not Seattle. Let's see. Do we have a winner? Atlanta. I did not know that either. I need to beef up my hockey knowledge. But maybe one day Portland will get an NHL team. Want to move to our next sponsor, Jeremy. Jeremy is with Goliath Technologies. We thank you for being one of our sponsors and would like to turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. So as Kelly said, my name is Jeremy Gabriel. I'm with Goliath Technologies. I'm one of the senior account executives there. I just want to take the next few minutes to talk with you about why clients chosen Goliath to help them with their Citrix environments. So Goliath is an IT operations software that's purpose-built with embedded intelligence and automation so you can anticipate issues before they happen, quickly troubleshoot them when they do, and document those issues as well as the overall health of your environment. Now, these are statements that our clients use to characterize the challenges they were facing before they chose Goliath. Maybe you're experiencing some of these, but all of these are just symptoms of one thing: human communication. And these challenges aren't present because of any fault of IT. There's real complexity in Citrix environments, as you all know. It takes 15 to 20 vendors to provide a Citrix experience to your end users. And those users, if you look over here on the left, is where the real blind spot is, especially with so many people working from home now because of COVID. Then you get into the delivery infrastructure in your data center, and you have tools to see all of this, but they're disparate tools with different teams. And you can't get all that data in a single pane of glass to quickly correlate and troubleshoot those problems. Now, here on the left-hand side, we see the three main issues users call in about. But really what they are symptoms of an issue, and the root cause of that issue could be anywhere over here on the right-hand side. But with Goliath, you don't have to guess at the root cause and spend lots of time hunting for that needle in the haystack, because Goliath comes out of the box automatically looking for these root causes without any scripting or configuration on your part. The whole goal here is to give your IT team the ability to anticipate issues before they happen, like with our topology view up here on the top left-hand side, alerting you to systemic issues anywhere in your Citrix delivery infrastructure. Then when issues do arise, troubleshoot them quickly, because in a single pane of glass, in our summary tab here, you have all the data and metrics from the end user, like the amount of bandwidth available for the end user at their home, through your data center to the VMs in a single pane of glass. And then finally, to be able to document the root cause of those issues by sharing that data with screenshots, integrating it into third-party systems like Splunk or ServiceNow, and enhancing it with dashboards and reports, like our end-user productivity report you see at the bottom. The whole goal here is to transform your IT team from being reactive to proactive, which means your users and IT team become more efficient. And what that really means is your company overall can grow stronger. Now, finally, everyone has a slide like this, but I think the takeaway is that because we're putting together embedded intelligence and automation and focusing it on a very specific problem, we've been able to attract a large number of clients. The product has the ability to scale to some of the largest Citrix environments in the world with an ease of use and price profile that gives small and medium-sized businesses the ability to leverage the products as well. And because we're the only technology of this kind with purpose-built EHR modules for Cerner, Epic, Allscripts, and Meditech, this has been especially beneficial for our healthcare clients. So I hope you found this brief presentation helpful. We have one demonstration left, as you can see here, for the day. But if you'd like to come by our booth, you have any specific questions, or maybe you'd like to schedule a demonstration of your own, please feel free to stop by.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Appreciate that. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce Shane and Ozzy, sorry. And they will be kicking off our presentation for this hour. So Shane and Ozzy, thank you very much, and looking forward to your topic.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, how you guys doing? Can you hear us okay?
Yep.
Awesome.
Looking good. Sound good.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here. 5 o'clock, top of the hour here, so ready to kick things off. Hopefully everyone's wide awake.
Yeah, no kidding. We're the last ones before we get to the open discussion and prizes
and beer,
and whatever else we got going on, right? So try to adjust my
rock and roll, man.
So let me see what we got here. Trying to get my bearings here real quick. So where is the...
I just pushed it to audience.
Sweet. Is it coming up yet?
Can everybody see the screen?
Looks like it on my end.
Second. I'm just still seeing us here.
Yeah, open up. You should have the preview tab. Live view. Just roll on the live view.
Yeah, it's just blocked. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, so we're going to be kicking it off, talking a little bit about UC, Unified Communications in the data center. This also includes UCaaS, if you've heard of that. More lingo for you. Unified Communications as a Service, we're kind of going to be covering that, a little bit of both. It's a hot item these days, of course, for work from home. We did this for the Kansas City user group not too long ago. We're happy to be here with you guys today, going through all this, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. But I see there's some good conversation going in the group chat already. So we'll try to get to some of that as we can. Let's see, where's my slide view? So if we can go to the next slide here. I don't know why I'm having a hard time moving the slides here.
I can run the slides. It's working for me. Can everyone see the agenda slide?
I can see it.
Yeah, okay, cool. Let's just rock and roll. I can just push it forward.
Yeah, so thanks, man. So really, here's the agenda of what we're going through. Obviously, we're going to introduce ourselves here in a little bit, but, we're really trying to tackle some of the challenges, voice, video, all of that around, unified communications. We're going to kind of go through the stack from top to bottom a little bit, high level. Go through some of the deep dive configurations, some of the experiences we've had recently on some projects, which have kind of been top of mind, hot items for us. And then, specifically around the ADC gateway, and items there, because that's so critical to all of this, because we're not just talking internal. And some of the load testing, monitoring, troubleshooting pieces of this. And then if we get to it, some of the bonus pieces on a GPU, how GPU can help and whatnot. Just kind of PSA real quick. It's kind of old news at this point, but at the top there you see the LTSR CU2 was released. I had that up there when it was brand new. It's still relevant. So if you don't know, 1912 CU2, every CU that's released, every current release, every LTSR, it affects unified communications to some degree. So just know that CU2 is released. And another one that I didn't have time to get on here is the Mac client with Teams optimization just went GA. So that's a big one. It's another PSA. I just didn't get a chance to put it on the slide. But FYI on that, if you didn't see that, it's been preview for a little bit since 2009. Now it's full GA. So, so, just to introduce ourselves, I'm Scott Osborne, CTP, North Central Regional Lead for Choice Solutions, Senior Solutions Architect. I also lead the Omaha Citrix user group here. So, and also an NTC on the Nutanix side. So involved pretty heavily on the community side and like doing these things, for you guys and trying to help out as I can. So.
Cool. Yeah. So, hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks for joining. Shane Kleinert, Senior Solutions Architect with Choice Solutions. Co-lead the Citrix practice with Ozzy, Citrix CTP for a number of years now, and lead the CUGC local down here in South Florida. So, and also enjoy, presenting for CGC and various community engagements. It's always fun to share knowledge and learn from each other. So excited for this today. Like I said, been kind of in call center hell the past couple months. So we're excited to kind of share some of our experiences with you all. So let's rock and roll.
Yeah, so, this next slide is kind of a fun slide. We're just going to quick go through it here, but everybody today, the situation working from home, one of you or all of you might be in some kind of situation here, some of the extremes, right? Hallway, bathroom, shed, treehouse, whatever it happens to be, right? For my personal situation, kids at home, that's actually a live customer call in the bottom left-hand corner that Shane took for me with my little girl. So I'm sometimes single dad in it, trying to take care of them. But bottom right-hand corner, really the call center. Some of them might be could possibly be empty at this point. So, that's kind of what we're looking to. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, and I was just going to say, and the big idea too, right, is why the session title is optimizing for call centers. That's kind of planned, right? But in a lot of this situation over the last year, a lot of people had to move to providing unified communications, soft phones over Citrix. Maybe you don't run a call center, but you're also running your back-end ops or your business through there now. So that's kind of a gamut of the whole situation. I'm the guy on the toilet with the toilet paper and the stand-up desk. That's me. So let's keep moving. So I guess, Oz, once you're running through some of the UCC challenges.
Yeah, I got hold of my slides here now, so I should be able to click through this one. Thanks, cool. Shane. But yeah, so just to kind of some of the general buckets, right? These are buckets that you have to think about, since really with UC, there's so much to really pay attention to that everything affects the environment, right? So the challenges specifically, involve everything from obviously resources, CPU resources, memory, so on and so forth. GPU, do you have GPU fallback for if the primary offload isn't working? To headsets, obviously endpoints. Do the endpoints support it? Citrix Workspace app, the builds, obviously users. Users always fall into the equation. I kind of get to one of the gotchas later that it's kind of funny, but not funny, that hurt us on that front. Obviously, policies, management, client offload, all these figure into it. Redirection of the devices, whether you're using generic redirection or you're using the optimized virtual channel. And moving past that, we're talking about, the operating systems. BCR, where does BCR come into play? The VDA, obviously, and the media engines and these vendors that we're working with, do they have an offload engine? Do they have something we can make use of or not? That becomes very important to the whole story. For example, Citrix has so many partnerships here with these third parties that they've worked with closely to make the offload engines and optimizations work. Whereas, for example, if native WVD and Microsoft, they just got the Teams part of it working. So, those things are very important. And then, of course, connectivity, gateway. We're going to talk about TLS, DTLS, Netflix and kids, using up your bandwidth from wherever these small home offices are or whatever you want to call them. But, all of this matters really. So, I'll let Shane go into kind of this next one here real quick.
Yeah, sure. So a couple things to notice on the slide here is the QR code. So we have it kind of sprinkled throughout all the slides. So just kind of, scan those. Those will link to kind of key articles throughout the whole presentation of kind of recommended practices from Citrix, tech zone articles, community articles, that sort of thing. So when looking at the Citrix UCC stack, it's kind of compromised. If we start on the left side, we have video, obviously, and that's really, webcam delivery, viewing from a UCC standpoint. And we have, and I won't go too much into this because Oz is going to drill down in the next two slides around Hdx Generic Redirection, which is kind of your generic unoptimized redirection, not through a specific virtual channel that's optimized through Citrix. You have Hdx real time for video as well as audio, so kind of talking through both of those. And then you have your offload engine, which is specific, can be vendor specific from an offload standpoint. So on the webcam delivery side, like I said, we have, if you look to the right on the QR code, that's basically linking to an article from Citrix that kind of drives into all the recommended practices around webcam delivery. Ozzy is going to summarize some of those from a field experience perspective on the next slide. On the audio side, same kind of thing. We have a couple more options from a soft phone delivery standpoint. So we have control mode, which I saw some of the folks around Avaya had mentioned that in the channel. It's where you're controlling the some of the operations of that phone, some of the buttons and controls inside of your virtual desktop, but the actual audio stream is happening from the endpoint, right? That RTP stream is happening from the endpoint versus inside the actual virtual desktop. Local app access, we're not going to talk about that. I don't see much of that out there. I'm curious if anyone's doing that out there in the wild. That's where you're kind of, doing the reverse seamless technology. You're bringing that soft phone from the local endpoint into the Citrix session from a visuals perspective, but that audio stream is still happening from the endpoint. So we'll be, and again, look at the QR code there on the right, and they'll kind of look through and talk through, soft phone delivery. There's a lot of stuff to talk through on the soft phone delivery side, specifically around, optimizing whether it's real time, optimizing Citrix policies around that, doing UDP out of band and the benefits of that. How does Citrix Gateway tie into that, et cetera? So we'll be talking through all that. Peripherals obviously are important. You got headsets, webcams, and actually what do all the policies look like on those actual endpoints? And how do those get mapped into the session? On the Citrix policies and configuration side, you obviously have Citrix as a structure that needs to be configured, right? So you have policies on that side as well as Citrix on the ADC. Endpoints that need to be configured, workspace app configurations, locking down, specifically when you're talking about call centers, typically you're in a kiosk environment, so you want to be able to lock those down. We'll talk about that later in the presentation. Default.ICA, how do you handle unmanaged endpoints, right? And the benefits of tuning the default.ICA inside a storefront and what that provides you, we'll talk through that. And Citrix ADC Gateway is really around, DTLS. What is DTLS? Why is it required? We'll be talking through that today. What is EDT, latent data transport? What does that provide for you? As well as UDP audio and the importance of understanding, what UDP audio is and how it's technically out of band from the session. So we'll talk about that today as well. So that's kind of what makes up the stack. So on the optimized engine side of things, I think everyone should see that now. I had a lag for a second. So definitely take a look at the QR code on the side. It's important to understand how the optimization engines work. So those are specific. That's outside of the real-time option. So real-time is, Citrix specific, optimized through the virtual channel. The optimization engines are developed with third-party, vendor-specific, where they're using the Citrix SDK to develop an optimization engine. So the most notably, you'll see Teams, Zoom, Jabber, Avaya are kind of the most common ones. But the big thing to understand there is how the communication flow works. So basically, the business logic is what happens inside of the Citrix VDA, right? So your SIP signaling, your authentication, the GUI interface. That's kind of all inside chat. That's all inside of the VDA. But the RTP stream is peer-to-peer. It's happening from the local endpoint. It's either peer-to-peer or it's directly from the endpoint to the call manager, for instance, if you're using Jabber in that scenario. So that audio stream is 100% out of Citrix, and that's where that offloading actually happens. So that CPU processing is actually on the local endpoint. It's very important to understand, client versions. So all these different optimization packs work a little bit differently. We're going to talk through Teams, Zoom, and Jabber. So it's important they each have different failback functionality. So we'll talk through that as well. And it's important to understand how each of these work from a versions perspective. And we'll look at we'll talk about BCR at a very high level. It's browser content redirection and how that optimizes some of the web RTP stuff around Cisco and how it used to work with Teams before it had the optimization engine.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways for soft phone delivery, and sometimes the terminology is a little confusing, but from this aspect, first is what we call the real-time generic, the virtual channel there for real-time soft phone delivery. And the biggest thing with this is it's built in, right? There's no client agent. It's optimized for speech and bandwidth efficiency. And what I mean by that, if you've read up, Citrix, they've been doing this for a long time, right? So they got things like echo cancellation, the audio plug and play, the audio device routing, all that stuff is built in, right? So, all that stuff's there. Obviously, the best situation with this bucket or with this column is really UDP audio, where you're going out of band outside of the ICA or Hdx channel. Good would be that that EDT UDP fallback V server, where audio might still be in band, but then is maybe using UDP on an EDT enabled V server. And then, of course, okay is the least desirable situation, especially for call centers. If we're talking about call center specific, in that case, is TCP. That gets kind of hairy. You're going to have a lot of complaints there. So that would be the non-DTLS scenario. Where I have here for the end-to-end encryption, just so you know, if you are trying to encrypt, we still see sometimes with secure ICA and straight TLS all the way through, and those kind of things do break the other methods. So TCP might be your only option if for whatever reason you have to stick with that. Medium for the audio quality agents is always good for what we see, but FYI, high might be better if you're QAing. For a call center, they QA their calls, right? So, that's a big thing for that department is they're reviewing all those calls, and that has to be CD quality. So high might be a good in that situation for that kind of review. And then, of course, the compute memory resources, 3 vCPU minimum for sure. Don't try to go lower than that. All that matters, as I spoke of earlier. The CTX audio service, set it to high, and then UDP, as I mentioned before, on that end-to-end encryption, you can get that encryption going to the gateway with DTLS, but from there on back, from the SNP to the VDA, you won't be able to do that. As you look to the optimized channel now, what I mean by this is the offload engines. Now you're talking about, vendor-specific components, right? Zoom has them, Teams, all these, right? So, the limitations in the functionality could apply. We're all familiar, or anybody that's been trying to battle Teams for a while knows what I'm talking about. There's various, limitations, and one of these QR codes down below talks through some of those limitations that they have labeled out, and if they're Microsoft-specific or Citrix-specific limitations. Obviously, there's endpoint support required in this scenario. The Workspace app, this gets into the whole LTSR. Do I go current release if Teams is a mission-critical application? Because with every new release, they're going to probably release something new for Teams. So if you're stuck on LTSR as far as the Workspace app is concerned, which a lot of times I deal with healthcare, that may be the case. You're going to be limited as far as what the Teams and the updates you might get on that front, because Workspace app and the Teams piece go hand in hand. And then the better density, right? You're offloading those resources. Signaling, as Shane was talking about, is within the data center, but all that audio, visual, web stuff is end-to-end, so you're taking that out of your data center, right? And then WEM, any of these, you want to exclude the known processes, with your tooling. Really the generic USB, now when we get to the webcam delivery itself, generic USB, if you're not familiar with that, Generic USB is something that you really can't do with these HTML5 clients and those kind of things. But when you're talking about the native client like Citrix has had forever, these are beasts with those specialized devices like healthcare, like some of these things where you can't, there's no virtualized channel or you need specialized functionality. That would be the generic USB. It's uncompressed, so it's just straight native. It does require drivers, in the client, the VDA, I should say. So basically, the VDA takes over. So if you've ever tried generic USB, you lose it from the endpoint. It goes into the VDA. The VDA takes over when you're using these kind of devices. There's going to be a lot more bandwidth used. You got to have policies for the PID, the HID of the device specific to this. It's definitely not recommended, like, as I mentioned, with the higher bandwidth for WAN. And advanced functionality is important when you're using this channel, right? So that's usually when you need it. And then as you move over here to the real time, you can kind of read through these, but it's default set to enable. It's preferred unless the offload capability is there. This is where you have a virtual channel for that, for like a webcam, or device that has a dedicated virtual channel, or the third party, they'll create one for you for a cost. You can basically explicitly whitelist some of these items for that, and it's compressed, right? So it's compressed. That's why it uses less bandwidth. But in general, it may take away some of the features too for this functionality. Now, the real-time optimized is also default set to enabled, but this is where it gets into that offload capability, right? This is the ultimate situation that we want. So you can look through the bullets on that side of the fence, but this is that good density, and we're taking it peer-to-peer. This is the ultimate situation if we're trying to get to. And then the fallback would be the other methods where UDP audio comes into play, where all these other ones where we want to, look to it, make sure we have a UDP-based DTLS, EDTs in play, all that stuff. If you're doing the optimized stuff, you're out of band pretty much for the whole thing because you're going peer-to-peer. So that's the best situation. Teams, I'm just going to touch on Teams real quick because Teams is the hottest one, right? So Teams specifically, there's a built-in engine these days. There's not something specific you have to do like the Skype client from before with a real-time optimization pack. It's integrated. It's native-esque, and what I mean by that is, this here, if you can read it, there's these limitations that I referred to before, right? So some of the stuff like screen sharing, like we know wasn't there, the blurring background, some of these things that, because it's based on this WebRTC, you don't have all the features like you would native. So even though it's peer-to-peer and whatnot, it's a virtual control channel between the two. It's still not necessarily all native. So it's native-esque. It's pretty simple policy enablement, but simple, but there's always stuff to fight. The current release, the LTSR discussion, all that I just discussed, and really, there's that easy policy that you've probably seen enabled for Teams specifically, right? And what it's doing, as we talked before, is this signaling and presence that you see up top. That's between the data center and the cloud of, in Azure. What we're doing is taking that AV, that media, that screen sharing, all of that stuff, optimizing, send it back to the peer, and then those talk peer to peer, and so that makes it the best of all the worlds there. So. And really, Citrix SD-WAN ups the game. If you haven't seen any of Scott Lane's demos recently with the Microsoft, Citrix, Better Together type webinar series, really goes into how SD-WAN can get you to the front door of Azure quicker and really optimize this experience altogether. And then I got a note here for just for that Mac client, that new as of this week Workspace app Mac GA. As far as Teams goes, right? So the roadmap there, that QR code down the bottom left-hand corner, give you a second there, that's the roadmap, which is pretty recent that they put that out there for stuff that's in tech preview and whatnot.
All right, let's talk a little bit about some Zoom optimization. So this is actually me, as you can tell by the photo. So this is me on a Zoom session. I was testing it out when we were kind of building out the session and stuff, and recently built it out for one of our customers. What you'll see there on the right-hand side is you'll see the specific Zoom client when it's actually connected. So there's basically a few different things to understand here on the Zoom side. So it's hosted virtual desktop, hosted shared desktop, no seamless app capability today. And this was as of a few weeks ago. So unless something changed, which I don't believe it did, that's the way it is. So similar to the same engines that you have with the other optimization engines, you have a VDA plugin. So it's called the Zoom VDI client. And you have a Zoom plugin, which is on the local endpoint. That local endpoint works across Linux and Windows OS. So you'll see that there as well. Versions should be the same, but there is backwards compatibility. So the QR codes at the bottom kind of cover that. So there are some VDI registry tuning settings that are very important to implement when you're troubleshooting, because if you don't have those keys for failback mode configured, it's kind of a pain in the ass to determine when it's actually failing and when it's not. For instance, we had some issues early on with some of the iGel thin clients and the firmware, the redirecting the cameras and doing it the right way. There were some challenges with the firmware they were on, and you weren't able to actually get connected. Once we went to failback, then we got a little bit more information. But if you actually look at kind of what that engine looks like, it's very similar as we talked about. If you look at the business logic is going directly from the VDA to the Zoom cloud. But the actual RTP and audio stream is direct from the thin client to a thin client to thin client, or thin client to VDA. It's out of band, basically, is what we were talking about. Now, what you'll notice let me click the arrow here. If you notice when it's not connected, what you'll see as soon as you make a connection, because it's baked in with the SDK, what you'll see is on the bottom right of your tray, there'll be a little Zoom icon. If you click that, it'll actually show if you're connected or not connected. And if you look at these two screenshots, you can see that I'm on a different version than what was on the VDA. And when that happens, it basically will tell you if you have failback mode, you'll still be able to launch the Zoom client. If not, good luck trying to figure it out unless you have the logs enabled. The only downside with the logs is they're not too verbose, right? So how do you find it? I'm surprised it's not in the documentation on where the logs are. So Procmon kind of showed where it was located. So that's kind of the location there. It's probably hard to see, but it's really cryptic, the log. So I really recommend looking at those failback settings. My challenge when I was implementing this was the version. We had issues, and basically the next version that came out resolved it. So unfortunately, the logs weren't too cryptic, but at least they were cryptic, but they'll give you a general idea as to what's going on. So that kind of covers the Zoom piece. Jabber was a lot of fun on the last customer I was working with. So you basically have a similar layout as far as the optimization engine. So you have basically it's called the JVDI agent. That gets installed in the VDA. The JVDI client gets installed on the endpoint. So the same thing around Jabber auth, CTI, XMPP signaling, SIP signaling. That all gets that's sent from the VDA to the call manager, to the communications on the Cisco side, right? So you're basically that's not happening from the endpoint. The audio stream happens from the actual endpoint to the call manager. So it's 100% out of band from Citrix. So you're gaining that greater density because the CPU processing is happening on the endpoint. But from a Jabber perspective, those two need to be at minimum the same, or at least or up to 2 releases earlier. So they have a standard of 2 releases if you're not at the same. They do something which is nice. So they add what's called a device selector. So you basically can actually see your devices. So if you look here, you can see what it looks like, because that was a pain in the ass with the last call center implementation I was working on is trying to, where they had local endpoints which weren't managed by the customer I was working with. They had third-party call center. They didn't manage those endpoints. So they had multiple, endpoint peripherals that were connected, and the users had to always go in and set their preferences. So using this was one way that they were able to do that. If not, we basically we allowed them to do that through the desktop toolbar. We're able to grab that preference there. So looking at a little bit more to understand here. So on the latency side of things, it's important to understand what the latency impact is, because in our case we were dealing with 280 to 300 milliseconds, and we were just getting into testing the Jabber optimization engine. We actually been running everything through out-of-band UDP over DTLS, and pretty much had great results. I mean, it was about probably a 95, 97%. I mean, the calls wouldn't drop or anything like that. There was more of if a call is 15 minutes, there's, throughout the call, maybe there was 10 seconds, a little bit distortion. You could still make up the user. But when we actually were getting into testing the offload engine, it worked really well. The offloading worked as expected. We were starting to see some challenges around the latency. And then unfortunately, the customer had abandoned continuing testing and they wanted to go test physical endpoint. But if you think about it, that testing the physical Jabber client versus testing the offload engine would be a little bit similar as far as the audio traffic, at least, right? It takes a similar path. So important to note, one more thing here is if you Control-Shift-D will give you connection status. So that's what you'll see here. When you're actually testing, you want to make sure that your soft phone for VDI is connected to validate that it's actually working as expected. One really important thing to note here is failback mode is not enabled by default. So you want to go ahead and set that up, and it's not something that you just click a button in a registry key. It has to be pushed through the call manager. You can either create, in the latest versions, 12.5 and above, you can do a service profile. When you do that service profile, then you can do it group-based. If you don't do it through that method, then you basically have you have to do it through either it's an all or nothing where it goes to your entire organization, or you can do something called a Cisco support field, basically, which is you can do it specific to specific endpoints. But with the new service profiles, it made it for a smoother kind of testing experience when we were doing that. So I think that the engine is well built to just definitely understand on the failback mode, because when it does fail, there is a little bit of a delay between it reconnecting and bringing that audio back into the Citrix stream.
Yeah, so real quick, Citrix Policies, very important, to this. But for the most part, they're enabled. The ones we want are going to be enabled by default. But we do explicitly set these just so somebody, a noob can't come in later, somebody can't come muck them up, so that they see that they're explicitly enabled and don't disable something or something doesn't take effect maybe. So. We do explicitly enable these. So, specifically adaptive transport, we talked heavily about on the EDT side of things. If you're not familiar with that, EDT is an adaptive transport. So it could be UDP, it could be TCP, right? Session reliability is required for the parallel discovery. Session reliability, just in general, you need required, I would just say. Because, with that, it will attempt EDT or TCP and continually seek that every 5 minutes. And then that MTU discovery, if you haven't seen that, that we're capable of the capabilities there from a BDA standpoint. Session reliability is a must for that as well. So just in general, turn it on. Redirection, the audio, you got, policies regarding that are the ones that we're all familiar with and have been for a while with the plug and play. For call center scenarios, swapping headsets is a big thing, right? So, or if a headset dies and they have to quick get another one in there during the same session, you really need that. Audio over UDP, obviously. And then the quality, medium, high, we've already talked about that. Microphone, multimedia, the policies that have been there a while, they're enabled already. And then the BCR, just as a side note on that, BCR specifically, if you're not familiar with that, is just taking if it's browser-based stuff. So not really 100% fully in this conversation, but it does come up. If it's browser-based content, you can redirect that to the endpoint, whitelist it, send it back there, but it has to be in the browser. Basically the LTSR track with the cumulative updates don't support that. So again, that's where that comes into play. Right? So, and then, I kind of forgot to go through my click slides here, but as you can see here, what I was talking about with the adaptive transport, the MTU discovery, if you haven't seen that in any of the documentation here on the right, as simple as a GPP you can throw in there. That was big on the Azure front. I pretty much put it in for anything anymore when I'm doing EDT as the default. And then the basic policies you see here, right? User policy and computer policy with the UDP port range, all this stuff. It's essentially the defaults that we're cementing in and enabling, right, for that.
All right, so let's get into the ADC gateway. So this is an important part when you're looking to secure the communication when you're talking about EDT. So basically, Citrix Gateway provides the proxy. So essentially, you're basically it's enabling you to secure communication for EDT. So that's definitely a requirement. So you basically turn that on the NetScaler Gateway. Early on, there were some challenges with versioning and DTLS and things like that. So the later versions are definitely more stable. So we basically, what we're showing here on the right, you just go ahead and tick that on. I don't remember exact versions off the top of my head, but some of the versions you had to unbind and rebind the cert. So what you'll see here is basically when you tick on DTLS, that basically enables you to do EDT. So EDT is going to be secure over DTLS because you can't do UDP otherwise. But there's also something called UDP audio, which we're going to talk about as well. We'll touch on a little bit here. But if you look at the diagram at the bottom, what you see is when you have DTLS and 1.1 configured or 1.2, your EDT communication happens over TCP, over UDP 443 over the EDT stream. So EDT is UDP, right? But it's intelligent. It's still a transport protocol. They has some control and some intelligent mechanisms, but it's nowhere near the overhead of what you'll see with TCP. So it's much more fluid. You don't have to worry about some of the things we'll talk about later around the effects of a throughput when you talk about latency and how latency affects throughput with TCP. So you'll see a huge gain in your experience when doing EDT. Now you're still going to have when you're going over, the last deployment we were working on was about anywhere between 250 to 300 milliseconds, and sometimes a little bit more when they got more load on the link. And we were doing okay with EDT, but as soon as we switched to UDP audio out of band, that's important to understand when you look at this diagram. When you actually do true UDP out of band, what's happening is the general session is over EDT, but the actual UDP session is going over 443, but it's out of band out of the EDT session from the endpoint to the firewall, so over 443, and that's all encrypted to the endpoint of the VIP. And then from the SNP to the back end, as Oz mentioned, isn't encrypted, but that will be UDP 16500 through 509. So those ports are important to understand when you're kind of troubleshooting this. DTLS 1.2 just recently came out for support with build 1347, and it created what's called a DTLS listener. So testing with that, we had some challenges. It could have been customer specific. I haven't been able to test again. It's fairly recent. Where we weren't able to get UDP out-of-band audio to work correctly. I think it might have been more customer-specific, but they specifically were looking for DTLS 1.2. And the whole point of making the listener separate was to allow you to kind of set your own custom cipher groups. So we created kind of strong ciphers to meet the customer requirements, and we were noticing that still wouldn't force 1.2. Renee Bigler in the community, he had mentioned we were kind of troubleshooting together over Slack, and he had got that to work, and I validated as well, forcing government ciphers on the workspace app side. That basically forced it to 1.2, and we have an active case with Citrix troubleshooting on that to try to see, why isn't it doing that on its own. One other thing that's important to understand here is UDP audio is not supported via gateway service today. So a EDT is tech preview, but the actual UDP out of band, where UDP is going directly out of the stream, you're going to see a significant difference with audio quality when you're doing EDT. Are you doing UDP out of band? So that traffic and understanding that it is in fact out of band is critical when you're troubleshooting, and you'll see more about why when we look at the troubleshooting section. So UDP audio is enabled one of two ways on the gateway. So the first way is doing from an endpoint perspective. So that's where you start talking about managed versus unmanaged endpoints for call centers. So if it's a managed endpoint with AD, you can go ahead and use the Workspace App ADMX template. And you can set these settings that you see here in the diagram, or in the screenshot. And you'll notice these are similar settings which are set via Citrix policy, but you're setting them on the local endpoint so that they connect and ensure that UDP audio is enabled through the gateway. So managed endpoint, do it through ADMX. If it's an unmanaged endpoint, the only option there is to do it through the default.ica file. So typically, for our customers, what we'll do is we'll create a separate store. So for thin clients, that store is then locked down, kind of set up with keyword filtering and to make sure it's a kind of an optimized lockdown experience for the call center. So even though they have access to a lot of different applications, they only see that published desktop or hosted virtual desktop, not all the other stuff. So we lock it down, kiosk, and then we'll use that as also an opportunity to edit the default.ica file. And you'll see the same settings, right? You'll see about real time, our RTP audio true, allowing it through the gateway ports as well. And then you want to actually you can set MTU auto discovery for unmanaged endpoints there, or you'd set that via a registry key, which I believe I have. I think Oz actually covered that. One thing to note here when you're troubleshooting DTLS connections is your UDP out-of-band connections. When you go into the Citrix gateway, you click on your ICA connections. You'll also see a section here for DTLS ICA connections. Only when your session shows there is it actually doing true UDP audio out-of-band. If it's not there, it's not working. And we saw this. We had a scenario with the last customer I work with. It's still an issue, and I got an open case with Citrix to track it down. But they were doing source NAT, so you'll see that in a lot of call center scenarios where they want to control traffic. If you have, depending on how you're set up, if you're a service provider or whatever. So they had source NAT where their traffic was coming from a specific IP. So it's kind of a one-to-many. They're doing PAT in that scenario. And there were challenges with various versions of the Workspace app client where UDP audio would just fail after one connection. So we basically solved that by doing a double source NAT, or we're actually testing right now doing a pooled base NAT. So we have a one-to-one mapping. You're still doing NAT, but it's one-to-one versus one IP to many endpoints, and it seems to be resolving the situation. And that's a scenario that's not tested, from my understanding, speaking with Citrix support, and that's what we're doing to kind of work around that challenge. So the real thing, the thing to understand here and the impact of this, and I'll talk to this relatively quickly. We have a video, but just in the interest of time, I won't show the video. It's really impactful when you look at the video, but basically the key thing to understand here is the overhead that TCP has with window scaling, selective acknowledgement, congestion control, et cetera, has challenges when you're dealing with high latency, right? So the throughput is directly impacted by latency. So in this scenario with this customer, it was 80 plus milliseconds. In this scenario, even though they had 100 meg circuit, they weren't getting the throughput they should have gotten, right? And the reason for that is because of the latency. So they were thinking, as part of the troubleshooting, we were working with them, there's throttling on the line. There's all these different things that are blocking that from happening. But really, at the end of the day, it was just the latency, right? And so you have to account for that. So as soon as you switch to UDP is basically, it doesn't give a shit, right? It just, boom, it fires the laser and it's rocking, right? It doesn't care about it's connectionless versus connection oriented, right? So you'll see a huge difference in throughput. We were seeing below a megabit, and we're getting upwards of 15, 20 megabits when we're talking about, again, every environment's different. So that's something important. And when you're dealing with high latency scenarios, you want to understand that UDP is going to have a huge impact in your throughput there. So last slide here around endpoints. This is critical, and this caused just so many major issues for this customer. When you're dealing with the endpoints, managed or unmanaged, you have a scenario where, especially with Windows endpoints, they'll come up and they'll say, "Hey, do you permit these devices? Right? Do you permit the redirection?" So important note here is the speaker, right? So the headset is not considered redirected. That's automatic. It doesn't require permission. So what it's actually asking you here is your microphone. So if the user goes and clicks no, I mean, why would a user do that? But they definitely do, right? So they'll click no. It remembers that in the registry as an HT current user setting, right? So what you'll get is you'll get one-way audio. So I can't tell you how many calls in this last call center rollout were happening with one-way audio issues. From a troubleshooting, it's a complete nightmare. And the customer had basically local endpoints with local profiles, and they were getting wiped. It just caused a complete disaster. So the fix for that, QR code, device selective trust, you want to set that up. You got to import the reg keys first, and then you can control that through an ADMX. That allows you to have a policy-based control of redirecting that. You can also do, if you have the desktop toolbar, you can connect this here, but this is preference-driven. That's controlled in the local registry there. And then obviously there's different ways to lock down your endpoints. Look at iGel and look at the thin scale from a Windows perspective for secure remote worker. So I guess I will hand back to you to go through some.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end here. I know we're getting close to time, but they did give me a couple extra minutes. But just some gotchas. I'm not going to read through all of these step by step, but really the big ones that we've run into from that respect, is the UDP audio via gateway for fallback. Even if you can't do offload, or if offload falls back, really just making sure that we're doing some kind of UDP audio in a call center situation is so important. The call quality is just through the roof comparatively to TCP-based quality or what have you. So, latency, throughput, jitter, all that stuff really matters. Big surprise. TCP, you might not be getting what you think you're getting, as Shane kind of alluded to on that other slide. Available bandwidth and what's reported to you from a TCP, all that checks involved is much different. Endpoint user selections, he just talked through that. That goes back to what I was talking about. Users, people, sometimes being an issue. They don't answer the questions correctly all the time, so we can't depend on that. I think there was a question in the chat channel about how to do the Zoom BDI client as well and manage that for work for home. Obviously, they don't make the best decisions there on that. So, it is tricky. Teams, you want to avoid the dual team installation. That one's a bit me, where you got machine-based, user-based, and they're stomping on each other. AV can hurt you. Big surprise there. Hdx teams.exe. Make sure to exclude that kind of stuff. And then Teams, FYI, the primary monitor can be shared at the moment. That was one of those limitations I was alluding to, how it's not exactly the same when you're doing the offload optimization type stuff. So, that's kind of some of the gotchas there.
Cool. So we're going to talk for a minute or two just on load testing, the importance of load testing, monitoring, and troubleshooting when building out your call center deployment. So from a Citrix perspective, from a monitoring standpoint, you have Director. So if you open up you go to the actual HDX session that you're troubleshooting, you look at that user, you're going to see that, and you click on HDX, you click on the audio, you might see inactive, where it shows it's running, like it shows active. So that means, UDP, is working, UDP audio is out of band, but you might see something here that says inactive. And what that means is there's no audio actually traveling over the channel. So that's just something to note there. When there is audio actually going through the channel, again, out of band, not through EDT, you'll see active across UDP. So that, I've seen that when troubleshooting, a couple times the customer would say it's not working, and I'd explain, well, no, it's because there's no audio going over it. So one cool tool we use all the time, Control Up. I know there's other tools out there, but from a real-time perspective, Control Up's script-based action engine allows you to kind of enables extensibility inside the console. So what we did was we created a script-based action. I got to release it to the store. We used it for troubleshooting, which was because really HDX Monitor is just pulling a bunch of WMI data, right? So it's pulling all the WMI data for the session setup around RTP, what's being redirected, and all that information. So we basically wrote a little PowerShell script to pull that data, because when you're troubleshooting UDP audio out of band with a call center, you got a bunch of sessions coming in. It's a pain in the ass to do that shit, one by one in Director, right? So instead, when you have Control Up, you can do a search you can filter in on a specific delivery group, then highlight a bunch of sessions, run the script-based action, and actually see what you see here, which is actually showing you, we output basically, is RTP enabled? Is UDP actually working? Is a port assigned? If there's no port assigned, it's not working. And what is the handshake status, right? 3 being successful, 5 not being. And what you see at the endpoint when you run it, you'll see the output is UDP is enabled true. So that is extremely helpful when troubleshooting UDP audio inside of Citrix, specifically through the gateway or not, like either way. It's just important to have a tool like that. And that's how you basically do it. There's some other tools you can run in session, CTX sessions, some various things to see about EDT, but this is specific to UDP audio. Automate is a great tool for load testing. So we used this customer that we last worked with. We did 1,000 users, Cisco Jabber. We automated call center agents and basically had kind of robotic agents that would connect. The Jabber would connect. They'd answer calls automatically, and we were able to load test the entire environment. And also, one thing we didn't really talk about was session recording. That was a big deal with this customer, and they basically used Automate's intelligent session recording bot to pause and resume the sessions for the call center and hide the sensitive data in those sessions. That was a really big deal for them. So definitely on the load testing front, and if you have session recording, that's a great tool as well. That was a big deal for us. Being able to use that tool in a no-code fashion, kind of drag and drop and record those workflows worked out really well for this customer. Last tool, just mentioned for a second there, is just Clumsy. Jeremy, I brought that up on the last KC. Just go ahead and look at the QR code on that one and grab it. It's just it's VDA. It's local endpoint based, so it's not something that's a network tool like an Apposite WAN emulator. It's basically doing it at the client, so you can actually do various performance tests and things like that. Do specific output filters, outbound, inbound filters to specific IPs or ports, and add latency loss, et cetera, et cetera. So a really cool tool. And
yeah, we had a nice little demo plan for that, but we don't have time to.
We got a video too. I don't know. It's there in the session. I don't know if someone can view it after. It's a little thing. It's easy to do. So.
But yeah, and last, real quick on the GPU, can it help? Yes, it can help. Maybe not it's not going to be as much of a game changer as the offload pieces are, but fallback is where this really helps. So you fall back if you aren't prepared for that on the data center side. Your resources are going to run hot. So offloading any of that to GPU is going to benefit you from a fallback perspective. All of these will take advantage of GPU as they can. But yeah, and if you're not using, if you don't have any GPU, tooltip, for Teams, you want to disable GPU as you see up there at the top. But yeah, in general, definitely can help. If you have them, use them. So really, that's what we got. I've been trying to answer some of the questions as they come in the chat there, but we might not got to all of them. I know they're probably itching to get to the next thing, but happy holidays, Merry Christmas, 2021, 2020 sucked balls. So here we go. Let's get past it and get to 2021, right?
That's right. Yeah, we'll be around for the roundtable. So excited to kind of stick around, and I think a happy hour too. So just look forward to chatting. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Shane and Ozzy. That was awesome. I still remember one of my first projects as a delivery engineer was for a call center. It's pretty cool. Whenever storms come out here in Oregon, I know they're using that technology that we put together with Citrix. So I wish I would have had this presentation back then. It would have made my life a lot easier. Good tidbits. Appreciate it. Our last is going to be a little video from Stratodesk, and then we'll be on to the roundtables. Thanks again, Shane and Ozzy.
Yeah, man.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Severson. I'm one of the sales directors here with Stratodesk for the Americas region. And today we're going to discuss how Stratodesk mobilizes work from home. For those of you who don't know, Stratodesk is a visionary company behind the next generation software solution, No Touch. A blend of hyper-powerful endpoint management and Linux-based operating system, Stratodesk is redefining endpoint computing by delivering a cutting-edge endpoint management platform for VDI, desktop as a service, and IoT markets. Remote work, business continuity, and secure access to apps, data, and desktops from anywhere have become a top priority for organizations worldwide. Stratodesk delivers everything you need to enable your mobile workforce. No Touch OS and No Touch Center together are the #1 solution for deploying, managing, and monitoring thousands of on-premise and remote endpoints. How we enable work from home, or remote work in general, is with our No Touch OS, which is a Linux-based operating system for x86 or ARM architecture, specifically the Raspberry Pis. With that, we've added a new solution this year, which is our No Touch Goes. This is a bootable USB stick that comes preloaded with our OS on it and licensing included. No Touch Center is a centralized endpoint management platform, which is a lightweight OVA that can be deployed on a virtual machine, on-prem, or likewise can be deployed natively in the cloud with AWS or Azure. Likewise, we've included a new feature this year, which is our cloud extension, which is a simplified way of securely managing remote endpoints. The graphic here provides an overview of how you can deploy our No Touch solution, where No Touch Center can be deployed in the cloud with AWS or Azure. Again, we can host this for you, or you can host this within your cloud instance. Additionally, the OVA can be quickly stood up on-prem. With our cloud extension, you can easily provision and manage work from anywhere users while reducing vulnerability risks from opening a bunch of ports in your firewall. We offer unbeatable flexibility with the widest range of hardware and software support, managing both x86 and ARM architecture within a single pane of glass, solutions for both 32-bit and 64-bit environments. Our No Touch Center, again, can be deployed natively to the cloud. We have our cloud extension for simplified and secure remote management, flexible licensing and buying options, including both the No Touch OS and No Touch Center, along with a hands-off deployable methodology with the No Touch Center, where you can deploy the No Touch solution in minutes. We are hardware agnostic, supporting anything from x86, x64, 32-bit, 64-bit, and the ARM architecture with Raspberry Pi. Our hardware partners do include HP for the EMEA regions. You can get a select number of hardware offerings that they have, which comes with the No-Touch OS preloaded. We have partnerships with LG for their all-in-one solutions, NVIDIA for the Jetson Nanos, and N Computing and ClearCube for x86 and Raspberry Pi offerings. Here's an overview of our Stratodesk ecosystem for a list of partners that we work with, including but not limited to Imprivata, Paradigm, partnerships for hardware like N Computing, ClearCube, LG, ongoing and growing relationships with Liquidware and Lakeside, ThinPrint for print management, and most importantly, we have a new relationship with Avaya to help provide a better end-user experience for call center deployments. So with that, guys, we'd like to strongly encourage you to visit our website, stratodesk.com/demo, where you can sign up and fill out a quick form. This will allow you 2 all-access licenses to be able to test every aspect of the deployment that you may have to meet your use case. We look forward to meeting with you guys and hopefully partnering soon. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Citrix, for having us. We're excited to be here, and we're excited to meet you. Have a good one.
Thank you, Stratodesk. That was very informative. I appreciate it. So the next part of our CUGC XL Northwest meeting is going to be the Roundtable Events. We have 4 of them. You'll see that we have one that is for multi-factor authentication. We also have the Citrix experience for call center users, Office 365, and we're going to have that all things open, so all things Citrix. Thank you again for joining, and feel free to join the appropriate roundtable that meets your needs. Thank you.